Good evening, Democrats and friendly unaffiliateds and other members of the opposition. I'm Vicki Shea. I'm the chair of this club. We're live in the Gathering Place, which is the Homeowners Association building in Farrington, and we're also live on Zoom. Just 3 reminders, and I will turn this over then to our board member, Mary Carroll, to introduce our speaker. First of all, please turn off your cell phones. And second of all, please don't throw out the beverage cups. They're hard plastic and we wash them in the dishwasher in between meetings so we can reuse them and not throw them away. To ask a question, please wait for the microphone. Everybody needs to hear easily and some of us don't. And also waiting for the microphone means that the Zoom audience can hear the questions or comments. If you're on Zoom, you can type your questions into the chat box on your screen and they'll be read out for you. And now, where's Mary? There's Mary.
Thank you, Vicki. Well, September is back to school month, so it's fitting that this month's speaker comes to us from Public Schools First NC, a nonpartisan, nonprofit, statewide organization focused solely on K-3 public school issues in the state of North Carolina. And if you believe that a strong, well-funded public school system is critical to the health of our communities and our economy, I think you're going to find tonight's talk of great interest. Lynn Edmonds has over 20 years of experience advocating for public schools. She joined Public Schools NC in 2013 and now serves as its Director of Outreach. She's also a member of the Wake County Board of Education, serving the largest school district in the state of North Carolina. So please welcome Lynn Edmonds.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be with you all. And Mary, thank you for the invitation. I will move around a little bit, but I've been told that I'm broadcast on Zoom. But I have trouble just standing here, for 30 minutes. So I will move around a little bit, but thank you so much. I'm glad to be with you. Was anybody here in May? I was here in May. It was a different group, I understand, but I think there might be some overlap. Great. So I'm thrilled that you were willing to come hear me again. The program is different. It's not quite as data heavy. I do have some data for you, but I tried to make it different for that purpose, and I was asked to. So our theme tonight, my message is our public schools are worth fighting for, and throughout the program, I'm going to tell you why. But first, let me tell you who Public Schools First NC is if you're not familiar with us. And am I loud enough? Are we all good? Okay. So we are a statewide advocacy organization focused on K-12 and pre-K public education, traditional public schools. And when I say traditional, I'm not talking about a calendar. What I mean by that is the free, unified, open to all public school system that we have across the country. So we're advocating for North Carolina's public school system. And we do this work. We have a ton of fact sheets and reports. We are constantly monitoring what is happening at the state legislature. So we produce fact sheets and reports about school funding, teacher pay, per pupil expenditure, et cetera, vouchers, and you'll see some more of those later in the slide deck. We are very active on social media. You will see all the places you can find us on social media. At the end of the program, I'll give you all of those, handles and places you can find us. If you're not on social media, that's perfectly fine. Our website is loaded with great information. And then we do action alerts and petitions. So we've recently had a petition against to try to stop the new federal voucher program and to uphold Governor Stein's veto about that program. I will talk about that again later. And we do webinars and presentations, and we don't charge any money for things like this. This is what we use our grant funding for. So you can invite us to do a webinar for you. The webinars we do are archived on our YouTube channel. They're free. You can watch them, share them, et cetera. And then even for these in-person events, we don't charge unless we have to go to like Buncombe County. And then we'll charge, mileage, but otherwise we don't charge for our time. And this is who we are at our core. We firmly believe that public schools are a public good, and as such, we all should invest in them and support them. We all benefit from them, and every child in North Carolina is our child. So this is where we are at our core. Public schools are a public good. Mary asked me to define a few terms that you'll hear in tonight's program. So these are the particular ones that she asked about. So this is a very high level, definition of what these things are. So when I talk about vouchers tonight, I am talking about taxpayer funded tuition payments that go to pay for private school tuition. When I talk about charters or charter schools, those are public schools. And the reason I have public in the title or in the definition or the description is because they are allowed to operate outside some of the limitations that our traditional public schools have to abide by. And they can be run by out-of-state for-profit boards that are not accountable to the taxpayer, to the voter, et cetera. Some charter schools are nonprofit, great. Some are for-profit. So again, high-level summary of what I'm talking about when I say charter school. Magnet schools are operated within the school district, the local school district, Chatham County Schools, Wake County Public Schools. We have them across the state, and they're often a way to help fill an under-enrolled school. So they'll have like a special program so that families maybe in more crowded parts of the county, this is how they're heavily used in Wake. We can get some of those overcrowded schools, get their attendance a little better suited for the whole school community and fill an under-enrolled school. And they also, to receive federal funding, as of now, you have to be making an effort to desegregate your district. And there's federal magnet grants that revolve around that. And some of those are under threat, but we'll talk about that later too. And then Title I schools are again, our public schools within the public school district. So Chatham County Schools, Wake County Public Schools that have a high number of low wealth students. And so Title I funds come from the federal government to help support the staffing that's needed there, extra supports for those kids and those schools, okay? All right, so again, to keep with our theme, public schools are worth fighting for. I've got, I think, 3 or 4 reasons that we're going to cover. And the first one is public schools get results that these other types of schools don't get and can't claim. So there's about 4 slides that are data heavy enough that I'm going to read them to you. And I'll send these, well, you've already got them. And so they can be shared with you via email. So don't feel like you've got to, remember this. There's no test. I'll get this slide deck to you. This is brand new data that was just released in September or, this month. And this is for statewide results. Okay, so statewide North Carolina public schools, the 4-year cohort graduation rate increased from 87% to 87.7, which is a 10-year high. This also shows good movement toward the DPI and State Board strategic plan of 92% graduation rate by 2030. 71% of all public schools either met or exceeded growth. Growth is used as 20% of a school's A through F letter grade or performance grade, Test scores make up 80% of a school's performance grade. So remember that 71%, this is what's important before the next slide, 71% of North Carolina's public schools met or exceeded growth. The way a school is graded in North Carolina, they get an A through F letter grade. So let's say Edmonds Elementary School in Chatham County. Let's say that Edmonds Elementary School gets an A. Well, at this formula, which is 20% of the growth and 80% test score, these grades correlate directly with poverty levels. And so I probably have a lot of children that come from well-resourced families, parents that can provide, extra curricular activities, tutoring, whatever it is, lots of resources. And if, another public school in Chatham County gets an F, it's very stigmatizing. And this is true across the state. I don't mean to pick on Chatham, but there have been multiple bipartisan attempts to make this formula better, and they've all failed. And it's so unfortunate. Bipartisan efforts, there are Republicans and Democrats that recognize that growth should be recognized, have a higher weight in these school letter grades, and they can't get it done. The new superintendent of North Carolina Public Schools is working on it, continues to work on it. The previous superintendent of North Carolina Public Schools wanted this changed. So we are not giving up. We are advocating for that formula to be more balanced. Of all the states in the United States that use A through F letter grades, and again, this is for schools, to label a school, grade a school. Has nothing to do with student grades. This is the worst formula in the United States. The other states that use them at all, and many of them have just scrapped this altogether, the growth and the test score is more balanced. And so then the test score is better. And this matters with like school choice. If we're going to throw millions of dollars in vouchers at families, and they just go and all a family is looking at is that school's test score or school grade, it's not a fair depiction of what is actually happening in that school building. More new data, the percentage of students proficient in reading and math reached their highest level in 3 years. And remember, pandemic was 5 years ago. So, this is good news. This is stride. In 12 out of 15 tests, only grade 3 reading, English 2, and NC Math 1 did not achieve their highest level. All end of grade math tests had their highest levels in 3 years in the percentage of students achieving grade level proficiency. The combined results for all grades and subjects, composite score, for all race, ethnicity groups also reached their highest level in 3 years. Again, this is statewide data. The ACT composite score for 11th graders was up slightly from last year at 18.2 and moving toward the state goal of 20 by 2030. 35% of English learners progressed through and exited English learner status, up from 27% last year. All right, still have much work to do. This is in no way to dismiss the work that is left before us. But we're talking about achievement and accountability because this is one of the reasons that our public schools are worth fighting for. They have to show you their accountability. They do achieve for students, and charters and privates can't say that. Scores in most grades, so where we need more work is that scores in most grades and subjects still fall short of pre-pandemic levels, which a lot of folks are rightly concerned about. Statewide, only grade 4 reading and math have exceeded pre-pandemic levels, though many others are close. Hurricane Helene had a big impact, and that is factored in here because that was multiple counties, not one county. That added additional challenges for our western counties that lost multiple weeks of school, and we all know why, because of that devastation. Achievement and accountability. Public schools operate in full sunlight. They're governed by publicly elected school boards that have to answer to the public and to the taxpayer. They have to publish their test scores. They have to publish their graduation rates. And we're not saying that's a bad thing. We think that's a good thing. Okay. District school finances have to be made public, how a district is spending taxpayer dollars. School governance has to be done out in the open, in the public eye. In Wake County, we stream our meetings on YouTube. I think districts across the state do that. They have some kind of streaming option now so that the public can see what is going on in that school district. Our discipline policies have to be made public, and staff credentials have to be public. That's on the public school side. Charter schools are required to follow those sunshine laws. Private schools do not. In fact, in North Carolina, we require almost nothing of the private schools, big or small, that are getting millions of taxpayer dollars in the form of a voucher. They don't have that list on the Spotlight Sunshine side, does not apply to the private school side. So how that is, related to, well, why do we care? Because this is what the General Assembly has done with voucher funding since they started the program in 2015. This is the allocation, the dollar allocation per year to private schools in North Carolina that accept vouchers. Most of them do. There are some that don't take the state voucher, but most of them do. So this school year alone, just in 25-26, there's $731 million in the base state budget for this one school year allocated to private school vouchers. Now, the reason, this is where I would move around a little slightly more. The reason, see where I have the forward funding, the little bubble, I know it's hard to see over in the lower corner. The reason that's there is because if you look at the 25-26 bar graph, you see that it doesn't reach 700 million, but 731 million is allocated. This bar chart is showing you, because the General Assembly forward funds money each year for the voucher program, what's not spent stays in the pot. So this is what they allocated for with House Bill 10, all of that purple going across to 2033-34. But if any money accumulates that year that's not spent, it stays in the base budget for vouchers. Does that make sense? Okay. I put that in there because I didn't want to show you a bar chart that didn't match the dollar amount and not explain it to you. Private schools in North Carolina that receive state-funded tuition payments are required to administer tests. A lot of voucher advocates will say, oh no, they are required to administer a test. They are required to administer a test. However, at grades 3 and up, each school gets to pick the test that they give to those students. And that test is not disclosed to the public, and the results are not made public. So we don't know if those kids are learning anything at all. And let me just go back before we leave. We'll come back a little bit to vouchers in a minute, but there's schools, every time I do these presentations, we know there are good private schools in North Carolina. There's good private schools across the country. K-12, that's great. And they do exist, and their students achieve well, and they go on to do great things, and they do, get great academics and test scores, et cetera. But that's not the majority. Most of them in North Carolina are small church basement or shopping mall, rented, property, what have you. They may have 12 students in them. They may have 40 students in them. And that's who we're talking about. That's where the real concern is, because they're getting this voucher money too. Another reason public schools are worth fighting for is because they educate all children, all children. Public schools are open to all children regardless of family income, ability, culture, needs, etc. Public schools provide free supports such as transportation and school meals. Public schools provide special education services that span a wide variety of need, from individual education plans or IEPs to one-on-one supports. For some children, the only place that they or their family will access some of these community-based services is through our public schools. School counselors, psychologists, nurses, and social workers help students and families access these services. So these helping professionals, school counselors, psychologists, et cetera, they don't just focus on the classroom day and what happens during school hours. They are resourcing and helping families navigate supports outside the school system. And private schools don't have to provide any of that. North Carolina private schools that receive, again, taxpayer-funded vouchers are not required to provide transportation or school meals, student support such as English language learning, and they're not required to provide special education services at all. Can you find a private school in North Carolina that might provide some of these? Sure. But again, we're talking about the vast majority of where this taxpayer money is going for these vouchers. They're not providing these services. North Carolina private schools that receive state-funded vouchers are allowed to unenroll or dismiss students at any time for any reason. So if their behavior is not something that the school deems is appropriate for their school, they can kick them out without warning. No, trial period or anything like that. It's totally permissible for them to do that. They can discriminate based on ability, so special needs, again, second, English learners, religion, family circumstance, or lifestyle. So what I mean when I say family circumstance? Many private schools discriminate based on religion, but they also, some of them put in their handbooks or in the application that if the family if there's any LGBTQ plus family member, the parent, if they participate in like a pride parade or something of that nature, they're not allowed in their school. So it goes beyond just the religion. Lifestyle, same thing. Or if there's not a mother and father in the home, this kind of stuff. We have a report about this. It's a long report where we reviewed voucher receiving private schools, their handbooks, their websites, their applications, et cetera. And all of that is outlined in this report about how they discriminate. We give you an example and the citation, where it came from, the school, the county, et cetera. And we just updated this in July. So you can find this on our website. It's free. You can download it, et cetera. And that when I send you these slides, that link is a hot link, so you'll be able to click on it to get straight to it. This is a map that shows where our tax dollars are going for these private school vouchers. So most of the money is going to our most populated urban counties, and some counties in North Carolina don't have a voucher receiving private school at all. So that means that those taxpayers are funneling their tax dollars to Wake, Mecklenburg, these more urban counties to subsidize private school tuition when they don't even have a private school in their own county. And we know that our school districts across the state need all the funds they can get. The QR code here the map is interactive online so that you could click on a particular county and see the dollar amount allocated to that county for vouchers. This is what has happened over time. So when vouchers first came to North Carolina in 2015, it was passed by bipartisan legislation. Republicans and Democrats both voted for it, got it across, and passed. Because we were told, and the public was told, that it was for low-income, mostly Black and brown children to escape their failing public schools. So it started out in the first, iteration of the program that most of the voucher recipients were Black or African American. And you see over time what has happened. Because not only have they increased the dollar amount that can be received, they've opened up that anybody of any income level can receive the voucher. Another thing they did in the first few years of the voucher program, your child had to be previously enrolled in a public school in order to get the voucher. That no longer exists. So that means, and we have evidence, the data is clear. With the most recent applications, it's families that were already in private school, already paying that tuition, child had never been in public school, but they now get this coupon for their tuition. Okay, before we move on to public schools are worth fighting for because they support our communities, does anybody have any questions? I like to do a more dynamic instead of me talking at you for 30 minutes. So anybody have any questions about what you've seen so far?
Could you repeat your explanation of the 20%, 71% metric that was on slide 5?
Sure, it's 2080.
Excuse me, to follow up, what growth, what does growth measure?
I don't know what the question is.
Okay. I probably don't have to go back all that far. So growth, if a student comes in and they're on, a certain reading level and at the start of the school year, regardless of the grade, but since we're talking about reading, we'll say K-3. They're on a certain reading level and through the year, by the end of the school year, they are now at one of the next levels or 2 or 3 levels above where they started. Same thing if we're talking about math. Their math skills are here, but by the end of the school year, they've made progress, and now they're, 2, 3 levels above where they started at that school year. That's growth. The test score is literally a 1 point in time end of grade test. So maybe the kid didn't do well on the test that day, and that's 80%. It's school-wide, it's not just the one student. But school-wide, they give the test and 80% of those test scores gets filtered into this formula. Does that help?
Yeah, I wanted to see the slide before this too.
So the reason I talked about the A through F school grades on the next slide is because of this here. That 71% of students in North Carolina public schools met or exceeded the growth expectation. So you could have a school whose students grew really well. They improved their reading scores, they improved their math scores, but they didn't perform well on the test. And so they get slapped with and again, these grades correlate directly with poverty levels. So almost always a school that gets a D or an F has a high population of low wealth children that need more support and more resources. And often those schools are harder to staff with highly qualified teachers. So does that help? Yeah. Sorry, I hope I can try to get back to where we were. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So there was the graph of, it was voucher, charter, magnet, and something else. So vouchers are taxpayer funded.
Correct.
Okay, and charter schools, most of them were just
All of these are taxpayer funded. So
everything from A to, okay.
yeah. Private schools are not exclusively taxpayer funded, just the voucher is, because families are paying tuition, right? So a private school charges tuition, but they're now getting state taxpayer money
I see.
to subsidize. And another thing we saw because we got universal vouchers just a year ago where they completely blew off the income cap, meaning anybody making any amount of money can access a voucher. When that happened, most private schools raised their tuition. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? So we're working on a report now to show that, but it's been, we've got some concrete examples, but we're working on a larger, more comprehensive report to show those tuition increases.
Oh, I have one more question. I'm sorry. You had something about, you're getting information about what's going on in these schools from ex-students, current students, people that were thrown out of the schools. Who is giving you like inside information about what actually goes on in schools?
I see what you're saying. So our report about how they discriminate, it's from their handbooks. It's from their handbooks, their websites. I mean, they tell you right there, if your family doesn't comply to this or that lifestyle, if your child has special needs and an IEP, we're not the school for you. I mean, they say it explicitly. Yep.
Just, I don't understand the charter model. Is the charter model entirely state funded? Do they pay tuition? How does that work?
There's no tuition with charter schools. They're free, and they're public, and they are supposed to be open to all students. But some of them don't offer robust special education services or offer them at all. And some of them, they're not required to offer transportation or school meals. So that's a barrier for some families. So they can say, well, we're open to all students, but if you can't get your kid there, or you can't get, some charter schools, will offer what's called an express stop. So maybe they come here to your racket club to pick the kids up, and that's their transportation, but they're not coming to your door to pick up your kid, which is what public schools are required to do. So you could be a family that's interested in the charter school that's close by here. You like it a lot, you think it'd be a good fit for your kid, but you can't get your kid over here to the racket club for the one access point to transportation to get them there. Does that help? But there's no tuition. So they just have other barriers, and they have flexibility that public schools don't have. For example, in North Carolina, we have a state calendar law, and that dictates that we cannot start, K-12 schools can't start before like August 26th. And you have to end the school year, I think, by June 10th. That is state law. So traditional public schools can't make their own calendar. Now, you may have read that some districts choose just to violate the law and they start their calendar when they think is best, and get kids out earlier in the summer, but the state can withhold funding from you if you do, and they're starting to get a lot more strict about that, about consequences for districts that do that. But that's just an example of a state law that K-12 traditional schools have to follow. Charter schools don't have to follow that.
When the private school movement started in the 1960s, it was basically a way to avoid integration. It appears from that chart that there's kind of a resegregation going on. Is that correct?
I would say. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's also happening with charter schools. I don't have a slide about it, but we have a charter school report also. And I think that was published in June. It's right along the same time as a privatization report for voucher schools. But you can find both of those on our website. But the charter piece talks about they're segregating our schools also. And there's a researcher over at Duke University that did a lot on that. And then some others, but that's in our charter school report that's available on our website. And where's Mary? Can you help me remember some of these links so I can add to that list? Because in addition to sending you all these slides, I'll send you some links where you can find some of these things that I'm referencing, like the charter report. So I'm watching the time and I'll move us along. So public schools are worth fighting for because they support our communities. And this may seem, intuitive to you, and well, of course they do, but let's talk about some specifics as to why and how they do. Local economy, workforce, and property values. In North Carolina, in a third of our counties, the local school district is the largest employer in that county. That's good for the local economy. In more than 2/3 of our counties, the local school district is the second or third largest employer in that county. So we should be taking care of our people and taking care of our kids. Strong public schools contribute to a strong local economy. Business leaders report that the quality of local schools is a huge factor when they consider whether or not to locate their business to a community. And we know what other parts of the country look like when their schools are not well resourced and taken care of and supported. Businesses don't want to go in those places, and it impacts, home values and things like that. But with specific regard to the economy and businesses, I want to share the Apple example with you. Apple, as in Apple, a major corporation. They came to Wake County, but before they came to Wake County, the chair of the Wake County Commissioners at that time, Matt Calabria, said this. He said, quote, "When we were first talking to Apple execs who came into town and they wanted to know about quality of life stuff, schools stuck out to them as a really defining characteristic for what they appreciated about this area and why they were here." Now, in 2021, we didn't have universal vouchers. We did have them, but they weren't what they are now. But one of the things, executives don't have to take into account, I've got to pay all of my staff more money, or higher salaries to send their kids to private schools. I don't have to do that because this county has got a strong public school system that is supported. So that's a business case that should be made. The workforce. Strong public schools contribute to our local and state workforce. North Carolina public school students are achieving college readiness and earning trade certificates, both of which support our local and statewide workforce. In 23-24, 300, and this is again for K-12 schools in North Carolina, 363 different individual credentials measuring workplace readiness skills or proficiency in career-specific skills were available to students in our state. So this is talking about some examples: Microsoft Office Specialist, certifications in MOS Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, North Carolina Nurse Aid Certification, Certified Veterinary Assistant certifications. These certifications are no different than what an employer might pay to have an adult, so not a K-12 student, but an adult, to get these certifications. So when our K-12 kids can get them in our public school system, primarily in high schools, obviously, that's something that they can use on their resumes when they go out looking for a job. They can say, I have this credential, I have this certification, just like your other, staff. North Carolina Career Technical Education, so that's CTE, students earned and reported more than 358,000 credentials in 23-24, which was an all-time high. And that came out of I've got the link there, the credential attainment report from 23-24. Strong public schools help increase property values in the communities that they serve. So North Carolina's model of a county-based school system allows more homeowners to achieve this benefit versus the municipal model that we see in a lot of other parts of the U.S., particularly in the Northeast. All right, I know I'm changing gears drastically, but I am mindful of the time, and we're getting there. We're almost done, and then we can do some more Q&A and discussion. Clearly, we have federal concerns, and you remember how I asked you who was here in May when I was here before with a different group? We got more into, for example, we got more into vouchers more into the federal concerns, more into some of the funding cuts that could be coming at us. So I'm just going to give you a couple of very brief highlights about the federal piece, because I could come back and do that and that be all we talk about. But two big things that we're worried about. So the federal voucher program, it's new. It was part of the big, beautiful bill. And the federal school voucher program is the first of its kind. We have never had a federal voucher program in the United States until 2025. States have to opt in. And North Carolina, unfortunately, in our view at Public Schools First NC, was the very first state to opt in. The General Assembly drafted a bill called House Bill 87, and they passed it. So they wanted us to opt into this federal voucher program. Governor Stein vetoed that legislation, but we're certainly concerned about them overriding that veto. And to be honest, they could have done it today. I haven't seen the legislative news, but they're back this week, so we're keeping our eyes peeled. The other thing that we're very concerned about is, again, part of the big, beautiful bill, they said they were going to cut $12 billion in education funding, but they didn't say how they were going to do it. So that's kind of what in Congress, that's part of the arguing or the debate that's going on right now. It's where are they going to cut $12 billion out of public education? Is it going to be Title I funds? So again, those special funds go to our most vulnerable kids, the kids that need the most resources and the most supports, and their teachers do too. Their teachers and administrators, the people that work with those children, need these funds because they need that extra layer of support. Special education funding, that is really hard to wrap my head around, because I don't care what party you're in, there are special education students and children and families that cross political lines, belief systems, religions, et cetera. So that is really just blows my mind that they would even consider that. Magnet grants, we talked about magnet schools. Remember, magnets are in a local school district. They're governed by the local school board. But they're used, again, they might be used to address an under-enrolled school to get more families to choose that school, and they might be for desegregation efforts. So if you've got a very desegregated school district, the federal magnet grants specify you can't get that federal grant unless you are desegregating your district. And that's part of the plan that you propose when you apply for the grant. So they're seriously considering taking those away. Medicaid funds, how is that relevant to K-12 schools? So especially with I don't know if you've ever heard the term McKinney-Vento. These are our children that have housing insecurity, and they may move around a lot. They may live in a hotel with their family. These families are getting Medicaid benefits, and some of our special education services come with Medicaid dollars or through Medicaid dollars. So we're concerned about that, because that does have an impact on K-12 education. And SNAP benefits and cuts to school meal programs. All right, so we need you. And how can you help? What can you do? You can share our content and our reports, the charts and things that I brought for you and that I'll send you links to. Write op-eds. People still read the newspaper. I know they're on life support, but it's worth writing them. Or letters to the editor, that's the LTEs. Alert your friends. You're going to, I don't know if y'all play pickleball or bridge or, whatever, in your book club or whatever it is, your civic groups, your church groups. Tell people this story. Tell people what's going on. Reach out to your professional colleagues, retired principals, retired superintendents, anybody that retired university folks, and ask them to help and, step in and join the fight for our public schools. If you're not on social media, you can subscribe to our newsletters. We do a newsletter once a week. Every Saturday morning, we email our newsletter. And it's got tons of really great information in there. And we take a deeper dive. For example, let me just give you an example. The federal voucher program, we have a whole fact sheet on that. And that's something that would be like a whole main article where we would explain it more than I can do tonight. So that's what the kind of content we have in our newsletters. And we certainly advertise like our webinars, presentations, events, and stuff like that. We have tons of fact sheets on our website. Again, I talked about the reports, and we do free webinars and Zoom presentations. And this is the last slide. We've got 15 minutes to spare, but this is where you can find us. If you are on social media, you see my email is there for you, and our website is at the top. So I'm going to leave this up here, and we'll take more questions. Oh, the YouTube, our YouTube channel is great. Now, some of that, I'm trying to argue that we need to take some of our YouTube videos down because they're just too dated, because we've been at this since 2010. But please check out our YouTube because we've got lots of great webinars on there.
I had one question with regard to the private schools and the stipend that people sending their kids to private schools would get. And you said they were raising their tuitions. Are the stipends total tuition?
No, rarely. There may be, I mean, I don't know every private school, especially these church basement schools that are really, really small. And by the way, you can have a private voucher school in your living room. I mean, there really are no guardrails whatsoever. But I do, so like last presentation I did out here, I had the actual tuition dollar amounts on a slide. I think because they've increased that, I think the most you can get, and this would be, they have it divided into 4 tiers. So if you are of the lowest income level tier, you get 100% of the value of the voucher, not tuition. You get the full voucher amount. And I think the voucher amount right now is in the 7,000 something dollars. If you're in tier 2, so you make a little bit more money, you get slightly less than that. But tiers 3 and 4, which is where we saw the most access once they took the lid off, once they removed the income cap, I think you still get over 30 something $100, 3,000 some odd dollars. So you're getting more than half of the voucher.
One of our Zoom attendees wanted to point out, and I will let you reflect on whether that's still true. He said, even if a student goes to a school, a private school, uses a voucher, if they decide to return or if they're kicked out and they have to return to public school, the money for the voucher does not come back to the school.
Correct. That is correct. We also, I say we, our public schools don't get any of the pot that's left over. Remember the bar graph that we looked at? So, I mean, we public schools first NC as opposed to taxpayer money going to pay private school tuition, period, all day. Like that's our position. But they can't even use the leftover money that is not accessed, not applied for. There's money sitting there. They leave it in a fund for future funding of future years instead of returning the leftover to public schools or to go toward teacher raises across the board or what have you. So no, we don't know. The public school district does not get that money back or money at all. I shouldn't say back because they don't get it to start with.
I'm just sitting here dumbfounded because none of this is new to me. I'm a retired educator, and I've been watching in horror what has been happening in this state and across the country. And what I can't understand, given that there seems to be, particularly on the other side, not the D's, but the R, this hatred for taxation and taxes, and how is it that they can say, fine, just give all this money away, and it's unaccountable to us. We don't care how they spend it, what they do with it, if we get any benefits out of it. I'm just dumbfounded and I don't understand And I mean, I realize a lot of people don't get their news from a newspaper, but how do you get the word out? And what can Democrats do, at least, if we're the only ones who are worried about this? Because I do know when we have current events, one of the first things that comes up is we have to import foreign workers because our schools, and this is not helping any, we don't have this high standards that we used to have in our schools, and now we're just sending it off to whoever. You want some money? Sure. Go teach the kid how to pray.
So one thing that dumbfounds us as well is how more of our rural Republican lawmakers aren't really pissed. And how they are voting in favor of the voucher expansion because it's harming their own communities. It's harming the kids that are in the every school district in North Carolina still has its own school, every county in North Carolina still has a public school district. And how they can support this and not advocate for the funding for their own district, their own constituents, families, et cetera. And remember, 2/3 of North Carolina counties, the school district is the second or third top employer. So we can't make any sense of it. And we spend a lot of time trying to educate our rural counties, county commissioners, school boards, et cetera, and the public about the amount of money that's being diverted to vouchers in their county. We have individual, like we have all of that broken down in a voucher report, and that heat map I showed you, the map I showed you, you can click on it and see how much money that county is getting in voucher funds.
Thank you. I just had a response. I had a child who went through Wake County Public Schools. He has children who's been through North Carolina Public Schools. I taught in North Carolina Public Schools for a while. North Carolina Public Schools are underperforming. And as long as the schools are underperforming, this data is not going to be here. And I know that's not what your message was, but you ask a question and I hear what you're saying about I hear what you're saying about the number one employer, but when the school systems continue to have as many administrators as teachers, and I mean, I know this is not what you're saying, but you're asking a question and I fully support not having vouchers. But I also know that there's so much data about how much the schools are underperforming, and I hope we can find a way to contradict that. There's also a lot of data on the underfunding of schools.
So I have to write down a couple of things you said, so I don't want to forget to respond. Okay. And I need to, I didn't mean to do that. Well, actually, let me go back. Oh, wow. Sorry, I hope this speed is not upsetting to some of your eyes. So I made the assertion that public schools in North Carolina get results, and we talked about the data that's new. North Carolina did better than the nation in many of the metrics that were released in September. And we think that's something to applaud and be proud of, especially when you consider that we can't get the Leandro money funded. That's a 30-plus-year-old court case directly about public school funding. We don't support our teacher pipeline. I think we are 43rd in teacher pay, or 38th in teacher pay, 43rd in per pupil spending, something like that. So we know that there is work to be done, and we are not hitting all the metrics that we need to hit. But our teachers are doing exceptionally well with what is coming at them. And we didn't even have time to talk about the culture war mess, the things that they're accused of doing and being in their classrooms that they're not doing or being. So I would challenge you to reconsider where we are in North Carolina with our public schools. Is there work to do? Without question. Without question, nobody's saying that. But our students are achieving in many ways, and that's something to celebrate, and we should support them to do even better. And our school funding should change. And, there should be a teaching assistant in every K-3 classroom that we don't have anymore. We could go on and on and on and on. You also said, you made a comment about the administrators. That is a myth. No? Okay. So in Wake County, for example, oh, really? So 90% of our funding goes directly into school buildings. So that's going to be teachers, classroom materials, the principal, APs, et cetera. It also includes CNS, so child nutrition services, and transportation. And that's true across many districts. It may not be 90%, but the majority of the funding goes directly into the school building. So I don't know where you're telling me that that's not true. You talk to administrators?
Say, I can't do this.
Okay. So that's not what I heard as was said. So
What, yeah, we have to support the students, absolutely. The more people we can put in contact with the students, I think the better off we will be. And generating data is not something that the teachers should spend a tremendous amount of time on.
agreed.
And I have a sister who saw that change. I have a wife who saw that change, and I have many friends. Most of my family have been public educators in North Carolina. And there's this trend to driving the reports. We've got to stop what's happening. We need more money. We need better teachers. I support everything you're saying, but having spent 27 years in state government and sat in the legislature many times, I realize you're required to generate the reports. But to really make some headway against the nonsense that's happening with our money, I think we have to quit putting educators in a position where they're generating information that the administrators can take to fight the legislators, so the legislators can refute the data that the administrators given them. And there's this vicious circle. And the thing that I told people when I was a state employee, managing billions of dollars over the years, was every morning when I got to a school bus stop, as I was going to work in Raleigh, I looked at that child getting on the bus and said, that's who I'm working for today. And so I applaud a lot of what you're saying, but we got to refocus on that. We've got to get the administrators focused back on supporting those children and not fighting the nonsense that's coming.
Okay.
And it's not an easy lift.
No. And that's not what I heard the assertion as. I heard that we had more administrators than we were putting into classrooms or teachers. Okay. Well, testing and accountability is a whole other, conversation, right? And I don't mean that I'm trying to avoid it, but have me back and let's have that conversation. There is, accountability required at the federal level. So that's, DPI is required to send that up to the federal, let's say the education department goes away, maybe we won't have to do that anymore. But then how would you be able to compare student performance across the United States, different demographics, et cetera? So our position is we know the over-testing of students and, it's some of it's state driven, some of it's from the federal level, over the years, different administrations, so We agree that the over-testing of students is a problem, but we're not opposed to any kind of testing and data collection because we do believe that we need to see how students are performing and we need to see those metrics. We don't believe in punishing teachers for, poor performance in the classroom, in the sense that if you're in a school that's got tremendously challenged students because of lack of resources or lack of, family supports or other social supports that they need, the teacher might be, doing everything in their power. But if the children need things that are beyond his or her control, the teacher should not be punished in that way. I hope that makes sense of what I'm saying. I don't think we're too far apart, but
We're gonna move on. Well, we got one last question and then we have a comment from a spectator that we're gonna read.
What are the requirements? There's got to be requirements to start a voucher, to do a voucher school or a charter school or something.
not in North Carolina.
There's nothing.
Voucher.
So hold on.
Voucher schools and charter schools are two different things.
Okay.
There is anybody can start a voucher school.
Okay, so a family with 10 kids, and they say, we can get a lot of money in vouchers, but even a ton of money will be our own school. Now, you don't have to have certified teachers?
Oh, no. No.
And then what are you showing after the kid, becomes a nudnik, that has no brains?
In the state of North Carolina, there are no guardrails for private schools receiving this voucher money. And let me give you a stat. Not a stat, a data point, a fact. In private schools in North Carolina that receive vouchers, and this is in the legislation, one has to have a background check. One. Not in a voucher school. In a public school, I know what you're saying. Yes. In the statute, in the state of North Carolina, a voucher receiving school or the state statute requires that one person in the building, whether it's 10 kids or 400, has a background check. And that person is the most senior administrator at that school. That's how it's defined in the statute. Not teachers, not anybody else working in the school, and no teachers have to be certified. Not a one.
Folks, the microphone is taking over. The microphone is taking over. It's time to stop. We're going to read one final thing, and then if people want to stay and argue or talk or listen or whatever, that's fine.
I wanted to put my contact slide up. So forgive me for.
We had, as a segue to ending our program tonight, Shirley, who is on Zoom, said, "Thank you for the excellent presentation, Lynn. I was a special education teacher in another state, and I have never heard a more supportive viewpoint as you gave for these kids." Thank you.
Thank you. If I can say.